Sustain267.
Welcome to Sustain267, where we talk about climate change, the environment, and sustainability in Botswana on Yarona FM. My name is Balisi. In today's episode, we take it right to the beginning with Chief Meteorologist at the Department of Meteorological Services in Botswana, Mr. Balisi Gopolang. And I ask him, what is climate change? And how does it look in Botswana?
When we talk about the weather forecast, the weather for today and tomorrow, we define that looking at certain parameters, whether it's rainy or not, whether it's cloudy or not, basically just like what will come out in a weather forecast. So that becomes the weather for the day. Over a long period of time, when you aggregate those weather elements, you come with what is called climate. So what will therefore define the climate of Botswana? You could easily say our summers are hot and wet, while our winters are cool and dry. Lastly, when you talk of climate change, it's like these parameters are seen to be changing. In our context, it has become warmer or hotter, and rainfall has become more unreliable.
So seeing as the climate is now changing, how does that then affect us?
How this affects us is that if you look at certain sectors of our economy, or just the traditional Botswana life, whereby come October, people start tilling the fields to prepare for the plowing season, it's that with less rainfall, because our agriculture is rain-fed, because of less rainfall and increased temperature, agriculture has become less productive than it used to be in the past. So similarly, the rangeland, where we graze our cattle, where the wildlife, thrives and do all that, they've become less productive. So there isn't enough grazing, and similarly, wildlife, there isn't enough of that. And even worse, parasites and pests that need warmer temperatures, we are seeing quite an increase of them. Another good sector that is also being affected with with less rainfall, there obviously is not going to be enough water. And with less water, we're going to have a more drought situation, less water for drinking, less water for watering our animals. And so it's going to get drier. We're going to see deforestation. We're going to see forests disappear. The tourism, another insect, and the bird life, which is actually our tourism, is going to obviously suffer, because with less rangeland, less forests, less water, there isn't going to be enough. So obviously that will economically affect us in one or the other, because there'll be no income from those sectors of our economy to sustain jobs, to sustain life for Botswana.
I guess it'll make life harder. However,
it makes life harder for people. Yes.
Yeah. So even if you're not as directly impacted, to some degree, your life will be made harder. Maybe not necessarily as hard as someone who's farming directly, but the fact that all of a sudden I can't get tomatoes. And then the next thing that I wanted us to look at was COP, because I know every November, December, it is all over our news.
Maybe before I even get to COP, we first have to understand that climate change is a problem. It's a developmental challenge. So now the United Nations, including Botswana, came up or adopted a convention, which is referred to as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is a convention that was acknowledging that climate change is a problem, and then they had to find ways to address it. Before I even get to what the COP is, the convention has an objective of ensuring that we stabilize the climate change causing greenhouse gases. Remember, because these are caused by greenhouse gases. This is accumulation in the atmosphere.
If I can just interject there, for the benefit of those who might not know what greenhouse gases are, would you mind going into a bit of detail on what they are?
The greenhouse gases here, these are gases that are emitted from combustion, like carbon dioxide from since when we burn fossil fuels and hydrocarbons, like petrol,
diesel. So through activities like driving and the sort.
Generating power from coal, So when you burn these gases, you produce, gases that when they go into the atmosphere, they trap radiation from, the sun, because they encircle the earth, and then you find that the shortwave radiation from the sun hits the earth, and when it's reflected back into space, as long wave is trapped by the.
They now act as a blanket to keep in the heat.
As a blanket, exactly. And then they are irradiated. Energy is irradiated back to Earth, which means creating a temperature increase generally over a period of time.
Right.
So it was on that understanding that the convention was adopted, and with a objective to stabilize these gases on a set level, because, right from the Industrial Revolution, when we're developing, we discovered these, so we're banning them. So they tend to stay long in that atmosphere. Yeah. So now, the second part of the objective of the convention is now to ensure that the ecosystem adapt naturally when we stabilize these gases, and also that we should not compromise food production in any or the other. So our agricultural practices should be sound, and last but not least, that we develop in a sustainable manner. That development should follow a sustainable path. So which means now it acknowledges the fact that climate change is a development challenge, and now the convention has a series of meetings, but it meets once a year, where the parties or members to the convention that are Botswana is also a member, because once you ratify, you call the party, and then out of that is COP decisions which have to be implemented to ensure that the convention gets adequate attention and implementation.
How can it be brought to the table with government so that we contribute towards the realizing of successful climate action?
It is imperative that addressing climate change, taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impact, it requires a collective effort. And in this regard, developing climate change policy, which was also involving a lot of people in this development, and it will involve a lot of people in its implementation. We have to make sure that people are informed about the challenges that they have, and which climate change is one. And we want to see more people involved and participate to ensure that the issues of climate change, we leave no one behind.
Thank you so much for listening today. This is a snippet from a longer conversation, which was the very first episode of the Sustain267 podcast in April 2020. Find the full episode available on your preferred podcast platform and listen to the Climate Change in Botswana episode. I am the host of the Sustain267 feature, Balisi, and the sound engineer is Maleho Makhoti. Let's connect on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on our handle @Sustain267 and continue the conversation. Take care.
Sustain267.